So, good evening, everyone. Welcome once again. Today is the fourth episode of our six-part series, and we have Kerri again with us. And thank you, Kerri, once again being here with us. So today's topic is on sensory strategies for teaching self-regulation. Kerri herself is a master's in occupational therapist, and her experiences has been mainly in Canada, Warsaw, and of course she has visited India at Madhvi Center and helped many of us here in India. So without taking any more time, over to you, Kerri, for starting your presentation.
Wonderful. And I'll just ask you to let me share the presentation.
So just give me a minute. My mouse is not working. I'm trying to.
I think I've got it actually.
Okay, great.
Working?
Yes.
All right. Super. And I'm set up here. Perfect. So thank you very much again, Ananya, and high five, and everybody again for coming in and tuning in and taking time to learn some strategies for the kids that you're working with or living with, or the kids that are in your lives. So today is maybe a continuation of what we talked about last week, but it's also a distinct topic all by itself. So we're going to be talking about self-regulation, and we're really going to be taking more of a sensory perspective of self-regulation. So it'll be a little bit shorter, not a whole hour and a half like last time. We'll get through talking just about what exactly we mean when we say self-regulation. We'll go through some different specific programs. So you'll see that these programs are teaching relatively simple concepts because they're geared for children. And it's quite concrete because some of these kids need things to be quite concrete. So we'll go through a few specific programs. Whether you decide in the future to follow these specific programs or not, we'll still go through steps to teach self-regulation that can be used with or without a program that's kind of pre-made. So the learner outcomes, I think you guys have seen them already. We'll go through them quickly. Essentially, by the end of this presentation, you'll have a basic definition of self-regulation from this sensory perspective that we're going to be taking. As I mentioned, we'll go through some specific programs that have been developed already. Then you'll also understand that there'll be 3 stages to teaching self-regulation, and we'll go through those, and you'll get some really concrete techniques, which is my keyword in almost all of my trainings that I've done, concrete techniques, because I want you guys to have tools to put into therapy or put into home right away. All right, so we will start by talking about what is self-regulation. So there's definitely a lot of different terms that are used in the literature, by therapists, by parents, by teachers, when we're talking about this idea of self-regulation. So sometimes we're talking about sensory modulation or self-modulation, self-control, impulse control, managing our attention and our emotions and our behaviors. And essentially, for the purpose of this training, what we're going to say is that we're talking about self-regulation in terms of optimizing our state of cognitive, so attention, and emotional arousal or awareness in a given situation, so that we're available for the activity that we need to do. Okay, so really, as I mentioned, managing our attention, our emotions, our behavior to be able to react appropriately depending on what it is that we're doing. And we're going to go through using alerting or calming, or even just kind of focusing, organizing strategies and using them at the right time. So noticing when we need them and using them at the right time. That's going to be the big premise of the whole training today. So just to give you some concrete ideas of what exactly I'm talking about, we as adults are self-regulating throughout the day regularly without even noticing. So if we're feeling a little bit tired when we're at work, we might recognize this, notice this, Sometimes it's even unconscious, and kind of change a little bit this state that we're in, because we most likely want to be productive at work. So we recognize that we're a bit tired. We make a decision to change the state, and we'll have our own strategies that we're used to. So maybe I know that in the afternoon I get really tired after I've just, eaten a big lunch. So I'm going to make sure to walk a little bit before I go into therapy with a child, or maybe I'll get some chai or a glass of water so that I'm feeling alert and ready to work, whatever work means to everybody. Another example would be more on the other end of things. So if I'm feeling really agitated before I go to bed, it's not probably the best state that I want to be in. So most likely I need to change this state so that I'm able to actually fall asleep. So I'll have my own personal strategies that I've kind of developed over time and I know work for me. I'll turn down the lights beforehand or turn off the TV, maybe do some quiet activity like reading or listening to music. And I know that that's a way for me to kind of regulate myself so that I'm ready for the task at hand, which would be falling asleep. Children don't always have such good habits of changing their state of arousal. And sometimes they're trying the best that they can, but they don't necessarily have the best strategies. So they'll be trying other strategies that maybe aren't really appropriate in the situation. Like, if they're trying to monitor or self-regulate in class when the teacher's talking and they're wiggling on their seats or they're chewing on their pencils, maybe it's a way for them to try and attend, but we can find them some more appropriate strategies. So essentially today we're going to be talking about this, about guiding children towards strategies that would be more successful for them for regulating themselves. Okay. So when we talk about self-regulation, often in therapy, we're talking about it for helping children that have certain diagnoses, things like autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit with or without hyperactivity, fetal alcohol syndrome. There's quite a bit of scientific data that talks about using some of these programs in this clientele. General behavioral or emotional issues, sensory modulation issues. But what I would say is, yes, it can be beneficial for these children. I'll just ask everybody to make sure that they have their microphones off. Thank you. So yes, it can definitely be helpful for these children, but I would say that really everybody benefits from having good self-regulation strategies, children and adults alike. And even actually, some of the programs that I'll talk about are used in mainstream schools in North America. So children are taught just as part of their schooling about, recognizing their own state of arousal, their own emotions, and giving themselves, learning some strategies to regulate. So it's really a useful tool for everyone. In the programs that I'll talk about today, they're most often geared towards school-age children. So we're talking about 5 to 12, elementary school age. Because these are years where we're developing these self-regulation skills a little bit more, and we have the capacities, the cognitive capacities, the self-control capacities to be really doing well in these types of programs. But I would definitely say don't shy away from adapting self-regulation teaching to preschool children, to teenagers, to children that might be nonverbal, that might have intellectual disabilities. It's really possible to adapt a lot of these strategies that we'll be talking about. So certainly not every child with autism needs to work on self-regulation, or not every child that's school age needs to work on self-regulation. So there's definitely some cues or clues that would help us to know when it would be really worth it to be dedicating some time for self-regulation skills. So things like a child that's having a really hard time to attend to instructions, whether in class or at home, a child that's very overactive or also kind of underactive or hypo-responsive, children that are fidgeting a lot, So a hyper activity we could also include. Children also that have a hard time to transition between kind of two activities that have different state of arousal requirements, I'll say. So maybe a really active activity, outdoor play, and then coming into a seated activity, they have a hard time to change that state. Children just generally that have maybe tantrums or refusals, and general difficulty with their emotions, things like calling out or blurting out in class can also be considered a self-regulation issue. So if we're working with children that have some of these observations on the list, then these programs are probably a good place to explore. And just before moving on, I want to bring up the idea of mutual or of co-regulation. So when I talked before about adaptations, this would certainly be something to consider when we're adapting self-regulation. And really the idea of mutual or co-regulation is that the adult is the one that's kind of picking up the cues and providing the strategy. So we can still use the same ideas, the same concepts, the same strategies, but it's more guided by the adult. And this would be for in situations where we don't really think that self-regulation is realistic. So a child that's younger than school aged, a child that might have some intellectual disability or difficulties. And in that case, that the adult is just a more involved part of the process, but certainly the child is we're still using the same cues that the child is giving us. We're still using the same sorts of strategies, but we're kind of guiding them through the steps. All right, so we're going to go now through 3 different self-regulation programs that exist. There are certainly many different programs, and they're very complete programs with training manuals and worksheets and activity ideas and all sorts of things like that. I've provided at the end of this presentation, you'll have a few different links to these programs. The goal of this training isn't necessarily to teach you one program, because there's, as I mentioned, training manuals and workshops and everything like that that you can definitely explore, and you'll have the links at the end. The goal really is to let you know that these programs exist, and then to give you kind of a general overview of the common themes that they have in teaching self-regulation. So yes, you will have concrete tools. I won't just say, go and do this workshop. But if you want to explore and have, pre-made worksheets and pre-made visuals and things like that, well, then definitely you can check out the resources that we'll go through. So we're going through 3 different programs. The first one that we'll start with is called the Alert Program, or How Does Your Engine Run? So it was developed also, it was developed by 2 occupational therapists in the 90s. And they have an online training, they have books and manuals with pictures and stuff like that. I'll say honestly that it was developed in the 90s, and so some of the pictures are a little bit maybe outdated, but there's also information online. If you look on Pinterest and things like that, people have kind of adapted it and made it a fresher view of it. Essentially what this program is doing is using the terms low, just right, and high to refer to a child's state of alertness or state of arousal. And they're using the analogy of a car. So they're saying to a child, how's your engine running? I see that, your muscles are really loose, your voice is really low, your eyes are almost closed. I see that your engine is running low. So we're helping them to identify in themselves what the signs would be of this low engine. Or a child that's kind of wiggling around and talking really quickly and, grabbing all the things in sight. Oh, I see that your engine is running high. And then the just right level would be somebody that's, ready to pay attention, ready to play, comfortable, calm. And so we're using these cues to help the child pick up on their own indicators of different levels of arousal. So that's it. They're using these 3 zones. And in this alert program, it's much more it emphasizes much more sensory strategies. Some of the other programs we'll see have other ideas as well. This one I would say is really mostly based in sensory strategies. The thing that's really fun about this program is that the analogies that you use can be personalized to the child. So although the program is called How Does Your Engine Run, and they're really using this car idea, there's a bunch of other analogies that you can use, and this can be really fun for children that have very specific interests, or just children that are more motivated by something other than cars. So instead of using those 3, car speeds, we can go in and use Nemo, for those of you that know. So in the movie Nemo, we have Nemo, that's kind of this just right zone. We have a bluefish called Dory that's kind of zooming around and really excited. So that would be the fast zone, or the too high zone. And then there's this turtle that's kind of like relaxed, and I think his name is Crush, and he's really kind of chilled out and in this low zone. The same thing, I think I have some examples here, and I'm just going to make sure that you can see them well. Oops, sorry. So I have some examples here of kind of a way that you can modify it to have animals. And so I've spoken to children about which animals they're most interested in. So sometimes we'll do, a turtle for slow, a dog for kind of in the middle, and then a cheetah for very fast. And that way you can kind of make it personalized to the child. In the example here also you see dinosaurs, so for children that are really interested in dinosaurs, we can do something like a brachiosaurus here for very slow, a T-Rex for kind of medium, and then a triceratops for medium, and then a T-Rex for really fast. So really the possibilities are endless. If you have children that are interested in specific topics, I would really encourage you to try and personalize these programs. I've made them for the movie Frozen. You just have to be a little bit creative. So that's a really nice thing about this program. And often I'm using this program when children are a little bit younger. There's only 3 zones, and you can kind of choose some nice characters that would be interesting for them. And as I mentioned, there's resources online on Pinterest, on just if you Google search kind of the alert program, How Does Your Engine Run, you'll see some different formats that others have made that are accessible, and those visuals can be used as well. So that's the alert program. The next program that I wanted to talk about is the incredible 5-point scale. I think it's been mentioned in a previous webinar as well. So this is a program that is made by some teachers, and they made it specifically for children with autism, but it's self-regulation. It can be adapted in many, many, many ways. And it's really about teaching this self-awareness using 5 different levels. And so they have, the 5 levels with numbers and colors. And then in terms of the skill that you're teaching, it can really be adapted, which is interesting. So sometimes it's used, as you see in the example in this picture, for emotion management, but also it can be for a specific behavior. So if we're having a specific issue with one of the common ones is voice regulation, so talking really, really, really loud in environments that aren't appropriate for speaking loud, this is a good tool as well. So as I mentioned, we're really using this 5-point scale, developing awareness, and teaching children to notice that, it's not just I'm calm and then I'm in a tantrum. There's some in between there. So we even have, we have level 2 where we're getting a little bit agitated, and then we have level 3 where we're starting to get, I'll go back so you can kind of see the pictures, it helps. Level 3 where we're really getting uncomfortable, we feel like we need to do something, maybe we're starting to feel a little bit tense. Number 4 where we start to get, maybe our jaw is tensing, our voice is getting louder, and then number 5 when we have this big, the tantrum or the blowout or whatever we want to call it, where it's the loss of control. So in teaching children to notice that it's not just 1 to 5, even though for some children it feels like it's just 1 to 5, we're trying to pick up on those subtle little cues that the child is giving us and teach them to recognize them in themselves so that they're able to notice as they get higher and higher, and hopefully start to intervene, use a strategy before then. So as I mentioned, it can also be applied for specific behaviors. So it can be things like a 1 to 5 scale on how gently we need to move. So if I'm playing with my baby sister, I want to be, use gentle hands, maybe a 1 or a 2. Whereas if I'm, doing rough play with a friend or with, my dad, then maybe I can go up a little bit higher. And then if I'm doing, a physical activity where I'm allowed to just go out and use all my strength, then I can be a level 5. And really teaching kids to recognize in their environment what level is going on, and in themselves what level is going on. All right, so that's the incredible 5-point scale. And then the last of the programs that I wanted to introduce today, before we get to kind of concrete strategies, is the zones of regulation. So the zones of regulation was also developed by an occupational therapist. Her name is Leah Kuipers, and it also is a complete program. So is the incredible 5-point scale. They have a book that you can take a look at if you're interested. So Zones of Regulation is a program that has a book and worksheets to work through with children. And it's kind of a combination of the alert program, that the car analogy, how does your engine run, combined with a little bit more than just the sensory strategies. So they add in some cognitive and emotional kind of awareness concepts from a program called Social Thinking that you have the link to also at the end. We're not going so much into that one. So it's a fun program because it's adding in really this emotion social part of things. It's, I would say, a little bit more advanced than the zones of regulation, than the alert program, just because we have more levels and a little bit more information with the emotions and the social impact. So maybe for a little bit older, but they are all geared for school-age children. So Zones of Regulation is using this 4 different zones, and they have them color-coded, and they also have a link. You see in the picture that they all have different shapes. It's because they have a link to American road signs. So if that's interesting to the child you're working with, fantastic. If not, you can definitely just use the zone colors, and that's perfectly fine. So the zones of regulation, we start with the blue zone, and the blue zone is kind of, they call it the rest stop. So it's really when we're feeling low, tired, sick, generally low energy. So it would be, my voice is low, my movements are slow, I'm feeling quite maybe down or just quite tame. That would be more in the blue zone. The green zone would again be that just right zone that we saw before. So it's kind of, green for a green light for go. So we're ready to play, we're ready to listen, we're calm, we're happy, we're comfortable, we're proud. So these would all be emotions associated with this green zone, and the same sort of cues that we talked about before, or maybe I don't know that I talked about them so explicitly in the alert program. So I'll go through some. I'm looking at the person who's talking. My body is calm. My legs are calm, and my hands are calm. My heart is beating regular. My breathing is regular. My talking is, just right. Not too high, not too low, not too fast, not too slow. So that would be the green zone. The yellow zone, so this is where it differs a little bit. We have a yellow zone and a red zone. So the yellow zone is kind of the be careful zone. So this is where we have kind of an alert. This is where we have to kind of notice where we are and hopefully find a strategy before things get a little bit too out of control. So the yellow zone would be emotions like, you know, I'm starting to get stressed or worried. I'm feeling uncomfortable or agitated or frustrated. So it's kind of those beginning emotions that risk causing kind of a blow up or a tantrum or a loss of control, really. So this would be, you know, my voice is a little bit faster, louder, my movements are faster. I feel like in my head things are running faster, my breathing and my heart are beating faster, my muscles are getting more tense. Those would all be signs that somebody's in this yellow zone. And then the last zone would be the red zone, and the traffic sign for the red zone is the stop sign. So this is the zone of really out of control. So this is when we have, you know, different emotions. So often we just think about anger, but there's definitely different emotions involved in this red zone. So it can be, you know, being terrified. So being so scared that we're completely out of control, screaming, running, crying. It can also be excitement. So extreme excitement. You know, you know, it's the happiest day of my life. I'm jumping, I'm screaming, I'm hugging everybody, that to the point where the child is out of control. That could be considered the red zone. And then of course, yes, we do have the red zone as a out of control anger. So that's where we might have, you know, as I've mentioned, tantrums or out of control behavior where, you know, there's aggression or there's yelling or things, where we think the child is really having a hard time just to process the information because they're just so emotional in that zone. So that would be the zones of regulation. I think I've gone through all of this. So they're using the traffic signs analogy. You have the 4 different zones, and there's more of a link here to emotions and to social behavior. And the social behavior that they're linking to is a lot about perspective taking and what's the expected behavior. So for example, if I'm in my classroom and my teacher is, you know, teaching the whole class, and I'm in the yellow zone, you know, and I'm kind of making some noise and wiggling my feet and, you know, playing with all the things on my desk, how does that make the child sitting next to me feel? Maybe it makes them feel, so I would be in the yellow zone. Maybe it makes them feel in the yellow zone too. They start to get excited with me, or maybe they start to get frustrated. How does it make my teacher feel? So really taking into account other people's perspective. So there's some content in this program that goes into that. That can be very interesting, especially for children that have a harder time with social skills. And they're using definitely sensory strategies, but they also go through just general calming techniques and also thinking strategies. So it's kind of, I would say it's the beginning of cognitive behavioral therapy, where you have strategies that talk a little bit about, for example, you know, having an inner coach versus having an inner critic, and thinking about the kind of thoughts that we're having. So there is some content on that. We won't be going too much into that today, but definitely if you're interested, the program has lots of information. So zones of regulation, they have this whole workbook, but definitely things have been also adapted in different classrooms and things like that. So you'll find some of these visuals online that are also using the same idea of these zones of regulation, but just aren't part of their specific book. So and lots of people have also found adaptations, especially with different characters from that movie Inside Out. If any of you know it, that was a lot about emotions, so they kind of use that idea. And there's some kind of meshing of the alert program, that how does your engine run, where they had the speedometer, and this zones of regulation where they kind of put in the 4 zones. So for sure there's some there's definitely room to take parts of different programs and kind of just use them based on what works best for the child you're seeing. So we've gone through the different programs, and now we're going to get into really what are the steps and how to concretely teach some self-regulation skills to children. So we're going to go through 3 different stages. The first stage is just developing an understanding of the levels. So we want to have common language that's used at home, between all the people at home, that's used in the school, that's used, even with friends. We want to just have language that the child understands, that we can use to refer to these different levels. So the first part is just about understanding those levels, identifying them in ourselves, identifying them in other people, and getting that really, really solid for the child. The second stage that we would want to teach is to explore a bunch of different strategies to help the child regulate their emotion, their arousal level, or their emotional level, or their attention level. So these, in some situations, there's strategies to kind of wake up a little bit, so alerting strategies, and in some situations there'll be calming strategies to kind of get back down from a higher level. So there's definitely some trial and error that comes with this exploration. I would love to tell you, this is the way to calm down every child, and this is the way to wake up every child, and that's it. But it's absolutely not the case. So I'll give you lots of different strategies, and then there'll be we'll talk a bit about some tools for exploring which strategies work in which situations. Because every child is different, and we really need to personalize the strategies to the child. The first and the second stage, so identifying the levels and exploring the strategies, can kind of be done at the same time. That's why I haven't really put them 1, 2, 3, because you can be working on them together. But really, to be able to apply all of this information effectively, so to be able to recognize what zone we're in, know that we need a strategy, choose the right strategy for the moment, this applying effectively, we need to have really solid skills in identifying the levels and knowing which strategies are working already. So the first 2 steps, you can do them together, but just make sure they're really solid and well understood before you go in and expect the child to apply those strategies effectively and self-regulate. All right. So we'll talk about the first of these stages. So identifying what level the child is at, okay? We often take for granted that children understand what we're saying when we say things like pay attention or you're too excited. We often take for granted that they understand even the emotion words that we use. So I really hope that you take away that you really need to give them time and lots of information before we expect children to just answer our questions about how they're feeling. Okay, so some ways that we can help children to identify their levels is really, as much as possible, to describe what we're seeing. Okay, we really want them to be aware of their own body cues and also of other people's cues. And a really great way of doing this is to describe. So if I'm working with a child and I'm at the beginning of introducing zones of regulation, I might just be mentioning to them, wow, I see that your legs are moving so fast under the table. Whoa, it looks like your fingers want to explore everything. And oh my goodness, that voice is really loud. All of those things tell me that you are in the yellow zone, or tell me that you're in the higher alert level, or they tell me that you're maybe at a level 3 on that 5-point scale. So I'm not asking the child, what level do you think you're at? How do you know that you're there? I'm really just giving them information from what I see. Oh, your voice is really low. Oh, you're holding up your head with your hand. Oh my goodness, that really looks to me like a level, a blue zone, or a low zone, a low level in the alert program. Okay, so describe as much as you can. And the other thing that I'm doing, even while I'm telling you this information, is that I'm doing it as well. So model as much as you can self-regulation skills, model as much as you can the cues. So if I'm working with a child and I'm trying to get my computer to work, during my teletherapy, I'm trying to get my computer working and it's not working, and let me just try something else. And oh my goodness, you hear my voice is going up because my computer is not working. Oh my goodness, it can be frustrating. I'm really feeling like I'm in the yellow zone. And so tell them that. And then, you can even go to the step of, I think that I need to use a strategy, and go through some of the strategies that you've worked on together. So really model as much as you can, and help the child feel like it's normal that they can be at any level. Okay, so everybody goes through all the levels. Make sure that's very clear. The goal of self-regulation is not always to be in the just right or always to be in the green zone. It's not realistic for anybody, child or adult. And make sure that the children know this, because often they hear, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, and then it turns into stay in the green zone, stay in the green zone, stay in the green zone, or just right, just right, just right. And it's really not realistic. So we want to let them know, you know what, when we're playing outside, it's perfectly normal to be in the yellow zone. Or you know what, after a long day of school, it's okay that you're feeling a little bit low on your alert scale or level. And we want to give them lots of examples. So we want to take examples from the shows or the movies that they're watching. If you see one character that's acting a certain way, try and point out, that looks like this zone. And how do you know? Look at how his feet are moving slowly. Listen to how his voice is really low. He's sounding really sad. I bet you he's in the blue zone. So give examples, take it out of books, real life. It can be siblings, it can be people that you see on the street, but really try and give your child as many examples as possible. Spend lots of time on this identifying levels. We want it to be really, really concrete before we even start asking them questions about their zone, okay? Other ways that we can be developing this awareness of the cues or the clues that the body is giving are strategies like body mapping or body scanning. So this can be done with the picture that you see on the left-hand side, of the kind of the blank body, or it can just be done verbally with the child. And essentially you're just kind of scanning through the body. So your feet, let's think about your feet. What are your feet doing? Oh, did you notice that your feet are kicking and wiggling under the table? Okay. Let's go up a little bit. What about your tummy? Let's think about how your tummy feels. Does it feel, are there butterflies there? Or does it feel, regular? Let's think about your arms. Did you notice that you were playing with your fingers? Okay, let's keep that in mind. And let's think about your voice. What does it sound like? And what are your eyes doing? So go through the body and help them pick up on some cues that might point them towards a specific zone. Another way that this can be done is using looks like, sounds like, feels like. So you have an example of that on the right-hand side, where we're kind of going through all the things that are visible in a particular zone or a particular level. So things that you can see would be, fingers moving, would be eyes looking other places than the chalkboard. Things that you can hear would be tone of voice. Sometimes you can hear breathing. If we're getting, into this yellow or red zone and we're breathing faster. And what does it feel like? What kind of emotion might it be? Or, butterflies in the stomach, like I mentioned. Okay, so that can be helpful in talking through a child and helping them come to the conclusion of a certain zone. Another thing that you guys can be doing is just having a bunch of different pictures of different emotions and helping the child to sort through the different emotions, the different zones, I should say. So if I look at the child that is on the bottom left there, that's kind of screaming. Okay, so let's think. If we could hear him, his voice would be really, really loud. If he could move around, he might be running around really fast. That's a few different cues that child would be in the too fast zone, or the too fast level. And then, the woman just above that boy is maybe, feeling a little bit low. She's holding up her head, her eyes are a little bit closed. So going through different visual identifiers in different pictures. Okay. And then one last way that we can work on this identifying levels would be to just kind of get into the habit of charting the day. So there's different ways that you can obviously just do this on a paper yourselves. In this particular picture, what they have is kind of different times, and then the child, this is using the zones of regulation, the child would choose what zone they were in at each time. So, you know, in the morning, I wake up and, I could have slept a little bit longer. I'm feeling still pretty tired. I'm in the blue zone. So my first, you know, I would check off the blue zone. And then, you know, I get onto the bus to go to school and I start to see my friends and I start to get, you know, a little bit more awake and I'm feeling good and we're chatting and laughing on the bus. And I was really in the blue zone at the bus, in the green zone, I should say, on the bus. And then I get into class and I look at the board and I realize, oh my gosh, we had homework and I forgot to do it. I didn't even take out my book last night. What was I thinking? So then we, you know, got into the yellow zone. So we would check off the yellow zone. So in that way, it can help too with that normalizing that we get into different zones, and it can help to find patterns on what time of the day it would be helpful to have a little bit more support or to have specific strategies, okay? So this identifying levels, as I mentioned, it can be done in at the same time as the next stage, the exploring strategies, and we really want to give a good amount of time to make that really concrete. So exploring strategies. Essentially what this stage is looking at is just trying out different calming or different alerting strategies in a bunch of different contexts. So we can do this. There's a bunch of different ways that we can practice this. But what I tend to do the most often and what's the easiest, I think, to implement is just to do a check-in. So at different times of the day, it doesn't have to be when we see, only when we see kind of extreme levels. It can also be when the child is kind of just normal playing. We can say, hey, let's check in. How are you feeling? And then give them a strategy and see what happens. So we'll go through some specific strategies, but I would just get into the habit of doing this before and after check-in. So you're feeling this way, you're in this zone, let's try out a strategy, and then let's see what happens and start to think about, okay, did something change? If something changed, then maybe this could be a good strategy for either, you know, when I'm in the yellow zone and I need to calm myself down, or when I'm in the blue zone and I need to alert myself or wake myself up. Okay, so it starts to give ideas in how we'll use these different strategies. So there are lots of different general themes for calming and alerting strategies. We'll go through, I'll give you kind of some guidelines, but I really want you to be aware that even if in my slides I say that a certain activity is a calming strategy, it doesn't necessarily mean that for your child in a certain context it will be calming. There's some activities. A good example that I have is taking a bath, where for some children it's really calming, it's relaxing to be in warm water, and for other children it's, you know, playing in the water is stimulating and exciting, and they come out more alert than before. And so some people know, some parents will tell me they know, you know, if I want my child to really relax, then I'll give them like a warm bath or a warm shower, whereas other parents will say, oh no, I know that I need to do that at least an hour before bedtime because my child will never fall asleep. Okay, so keep that in mind and know that some of these strategies, they're guidelines, but we always need to do some trial and error. Okay, so try and explore lots of different ones to have lots of different strategies, and definitely once you see that certain strategies are helpful, you can go back to the slide and think, okay, so maybe tactile strategies for calming were helpful. Let's see what other ideas we can have in this theme that, you know, in tactile, that can also be helpful. Okay. All right, so we'll start with some calming strategies, and we'll start with tactile. So in general, the general guideline would be that when we want to do a calming strategy with touch, it would be things that are warm, things that are soft, and when we're using firm as opposed to kind of light touch. Okay, so warm can be something like in the picture here, you have a hot water bottle, or they have magic bags that you kind of heat up, you know, that are filled with beans or whatever they're filled up with, and we heat them up a little bit, and it can be warm and soothing. a warm chai. Some people know that, oh, when they really need to just calm themselves down, that's what they need, some coffee or some tea. Wrapping up in a blanket, we can think of you know, swaddling a child as being quite a calming, relaxing activity. So soft, we want to think about the textures that are around the child. We give them, you know, soft clothes, soft brushes for a nice relaxing massage, soft blankets or stuffed toys that they can feel and rub, that are really a gentle touch experience. And then when I say, as I mentioned, when I say firm, I'm talking about avoiding this light ticklish touch. We want to use, as much as possible, more deep pressure or the whole hand. We can be doing massage. We can be using, for some children, on the top right, you have this picture of a handheld vibrating massager. For some children, that can be very calming. I'll say for other children, it can also be very alerting. So check in with the signs. So, you know, if you have one of these massagers, or you want to explore massage, and you know, put it on the child's shoulder and you see their face relax, oh, there's our cue. And you can tell them, oh, I saw your, you know, your jaw drop and your shoulders relax. I know that this is a calming activity for you. Whereas for other children, we might put the massager on their shoulder and their shoulders go up like this, and we can tell them, oh, this is your muscles are getting tenser. I see that you're getting more excited. You're going more into the yellow zone or into the high level. Okay, so describe it to them. In terms of visual strategies for calming, still in calming, we're looking at having dim lights, less clutter, so less posters, less things on the table, and something like following slow moving targets can also be really interesting. So things like you see in the top left, these are kind of visual timers. Sometimes they're visual mazes as well. So there's little drops of colored water that kind of rhythmically fall. And so that for some children can be calming, just to kind of zero in on that and focus on that. Aquariums, whether it's toys or actual aquariums or videos of aquariums, can also sometimes be calming. Having a visually reduced area to go to, so whether it's kind of a little tent or just a corner, or, you know, being allowed to put a blanket over our heads and just have a little bit less visual, that can be interesting. There's even some children that find it very calming just to cover their eyes, and it's fun to do it in the crook of the elbow because it fits pretty well over the nose. So that can also be for some children a calming activity. Okay, and on the right hand side you see just a visualizer, a light visualizer. There's also screensaver visualizers that can be calming, so you can be exploring those kind of things. In terms of smells, we're looking for things that are very soothing. So smells like lavender or vanilla, incense. For some children, it might be unexpected things that they just associate with something calm, like cookies, or, you know, and they associate it with having free time with family members, whatever it is. So be conscientious of this and try and see if you notice some patterns with smells in the child's daily routines. And then that can be a tool. So, oh, I see that you're really in the yellow zone. Let's just take out some nice lavender lotion and then you have the kind of the deep massage pressure and also the smell. In terms of oral strategies, if we think about babies particularly, often that sucking is a soothing, relaxing motion. Also for some children, chewing. So for children especially, that can be a little bit more movement seeking, sometimes chewing on a chewable object, like you see these chewy tubes, or chewing on gum. If it's sometimes, you know, we're requesting special permission because we see that has such a regulating, focusing effect on a child. Okay. And I had other little things to mention. Sucking in an older child can be sucking through a straw, especially something that's a little bit thicker, like lassi or a smoothie or whatever it is. All right. Okay. So we're going to go on to kind of movement strategies that can be calming as well. So we mentioned before that swaddling feeling, or the vibration, or firmer pressure. So definitely deep pressure can be very calming. Also, when we're introducing movement, we want to try and introduce movements that are pretty predictable, slow, repetitive. So things like rocking in a rocking chair, or swinging on a swing that just goes, back and forth, or swinging in a blanket, but really keeping the movement predictable and repetitive. In terms of that deeper pressure, we can think about swaddling again, so wrapping up tight in a blanket. We can think about heavy blankets or weighted objects. If that's something that you're exploring with a professional, I would definitely encourage you to explore that only with an occupational therapist or another professional that has knowledge on the weights used and when it should be used and things like that. But you see in the picture the boy with the blue weighted object on his lap, so that can be a good option for children that were expecting to sit for a little bit longer without too much movement. And then the beanbag chair that you see is another example of kind of taking that deep pressure and bringing it to a seated position. So that can be, if we have a listening activity and it works for the child to sit and feel that squeeze around them, then that can be a good option. Okay. In terms of auditory, we can definitely try and reduce noise, or for some children, having a white noise machine or having quiet music can be interesting. So you have in the left-hand side one example of a white noise machine that comes with an application as well. There's also just kind of white noise music or white noise videos that you can find online. And it's just kind of a background noise. Or turning on a fan is also a good white noise activity, just to kind of reduce, especially for those that are auditory sensitive, to kind of have a baseline noise and reduce how much we're picking up each individual sound. And when we're talking about music, again, we're going with this soft and predictable. So it can be music that the child knows already, so they don't have to be spending extra time, cueing in and listening. It can be without lyrics, if that's more calming. Explore a little bit what works for your child. Okay, and definitely in terms of just other general strategies, deep belly breathing is a really good one to be teaching children, because it's something that they can be using in any environment. So they don't need to have specific tools, they don't need to have equipment, they can do it at home, at school, and it's quite a socially recognized and acceptable calming strategy. So to teach this to kids, there's different tricks. One that I really like to do is giving them an analogy or visuals that go with it. So it can be something like, I smell the flower and then I blow out the candle, or I blow out the pinwheel. And sometimes for children, I'll give them specific objects. So a real flower, a pretend flower, a real candle, or pretend candle, and have them practice taking big belly breaths and expanding their belly and then relaxing their belly. For kids that are younger or that need a little bit more help with that, sometimes it can just be encouraging them to practice breathing with bubbles, to practice blowing feathers. The pinwheel is a good example as well. So that's a really good strategy to have in your toolbox. Meditation and mindfulness is also a fantastic strategy to be exploring with children. And then progressive muscle relaxation too is something that we can teach kids that's really helpful in a lot of different environments. So if we want to do it with children, often what I'll do is I'll walk them through the steps. And if I see that, to go through each part of the body is a little bit tricky for them, then I might just give them a kind of adaptation, like a stress ball, so they're just squeezing and relaxing their hands, or just a bear hug, so it's more their arms. But I'll take you through a quick example of what I would do if the child is available for a more progressive one, I would say, we'll start with our toes. So let's, squeeze our toes tight, 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 tight. Squeeze our feet tight, 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 tight. 3, 2, 1, and relax. And then, go into the legs. Okay, bend your legs if you're sitting, and squeeze your muscles tight, tight, tight. Into the belly muscles, into the arm muscles. Sometimes I'll have them, be a little bit silly. They can, strike a funny pose or whatever it is. Bringing your shoulders up to your arms is the next one. Count to 3 and then relax. So we're taking them through each part of their body. And for a child, and the face is often the funnest part. So, squeeze your eyes together, squeeze your teeth together. And then 3, 2, 1, relax. And for children that won't go through or aren't available to go through those whole steps, we can just say squeeze your whole body, or pretend you're squeezing lemons and then relax and just do certain body parts if they're more available for that. All right, so I will say that most often when I'm working with children, or when I'm asked to help out a child, it's for calming down. So yes, it's very important to have calm down strategies and to have a variety, but we also, as I mentioned, want to make sure that we're normalizing all different levels, and we're giving strategies for all different levels. And certainly there are lots of children that are easily fatigued, that are under responsive, and that really appear in these lower zones, or in the blue zone, and they really benefit from having alerting strategies. So we'll go through some of those as well. In terms of auditory, alerting strategies would be louder, noisier, unpredictable environments. So fast music that have sudden changes with, different, with lyrics that may be in a language even that we don't know. Just generally loud environments. The market is a very interesting auditory and visual alerting experience. So environments where there's people moving around, where things are happening, where there's visually bright lights or different colors, those would all be kind of alerting places or alerting strategies. In terms of tactile or touch, when we're thinking about alerting, we're thinking about colder temperatures. So it can be opening the window to have some cool, fresh air. It can be drinking really cold or ice cold water. It can be also snacks that are alerting. So in the oral area, we can be talking about crunchy things or things that have mixed textures that will be kind of interesting in the mouth. Sour is another alerting flavor. So something like a nice crisp sour green apple might be interesting. Carbonated water too can be interesting. And then in terms of smells, we want to be using strong scents. So things like lemon can often be interesting, things like peppermint too. So if I see that a child is, seems really drowsy, inattentive, and I want to be working with them, or they're in class, maybe that's the time to pull out a snack of some lemon water and, a crunchy tart apple. Okay. In terms of movements, when we're talking about alerting, we want quick movements, unpredictable movements, things like jumping, bouncing, spinning, swinging fast or swinging in different directions, physical activities, whether it's sports, whether it's, specific jumping jacks, jumping on a trampoline. Those are the kind of activities that we want to be encouraging. And then I mentioned this in the last training that we did, and I'll just go over another example just to show you that really sensory journaling can be a really helpful strategy when we're in this exploration phase. We have a bit of a different example this time. So essentially, it's the same sort of theory. We're taking this journal and we're using it for one specific behavior, and it's helping us with this trial and error in exploring sensory strategies. And it can be used for all different behaviors, whether it's sitting attentively, whether it's bringing things to our mouth. All different behaviors can be targeted. In this situation, we'll talk about in the classroom. Okay, so we've decided that we have this problem in the classroom of a child that's having a hard time to be attentive, and fidgeting and things like that. And so then what we'll do is we'll go, okay, so I have a child that's, fidgeting, inattentive, moving around, so we have this kind of yellow zone or too high zone. So what we're looking for is calm down strategies. All right, so then we'll go through those different calm down strategies that we have, and we'll start trying them out. Okay, so on the Monday, we've had 30 minutes already of listening activities, and the child is, wiggling in their seat, they're fidgeting with their pencils. Okay, we need a strategy. So maybe we're gonna give them something, a specific finger fidget, for their hands, for the last 15 minutes of the activity. So maybe we want to encourage a little bit of calming, so we might give them something to fidget with that's a little bit softer. So we'll see them kind of fidgeting and rubbing, this texture for a while, but their legs are still moving. So we think, okay, maybe the next day we need something different. So the next day we have the same sort of things. We have rocking even in the back, rocking back on the chair on the back two legs. We even have chewing on the pencil. So then we might think, okay, how can we, help out with that? Maybe we'll give them a chewable necklace. We could have also tried giving them, carbonated water, or go more into hopefully relaxation and give them something warm. It depends what's available in the classroom, of course. But so we give them this chewable necklace. And maybe we see, oh, okay, for 5 minutes, we had some really nice attention while they were chewing, and then they kind of forgot about it and then went back into this rocking on the chair. The next day, again, shuffling the feet, chewing on the pencil. So we think, okay, maybe the chewable necklace, they might think to use it when they're chewing, but maybe we need to do something for this movement. So maybe, as we had seen last time, we might give them that cushion that they can sit on the chair and kind of wiggle a little bit. And then the last day, maybe we see, it might be helpful for the whole class to have kind of a movement break. So then we have some time to stretch and break and move a little bit in class before everybody comes back. And for all we know, it's helpful for the whole class. So definitely we need to explore a bunch of different strategies. And this helps us know, okay, so in my toolbox here, I know that the chewable necklace or something for the mouse might be helpful. And I can explore some other strategies that have to do with the mouth. And I see that really movement strategies seem to be helpful, so I'm going to go back and think about my calming, moving strategies that I can explore with this child. Okay. All right, and then the last of the stages is this learning to apply all of these strategies at the right time. So to be able to do this, we really need to know what level we're in, what level the activity is calling for, and then what strategies I can use to get into that level. Okay, and so here is where we're developing the child's inner dialogue. At the beginning, we're going to be doing it out loud with them, but slowly and surely, we're going to be having them pose the questions to themselves. What level or what zone am I in? What level or what zone do I need to be in? And then how do I get there? So what level am I in? Oh, I'm really in the blue zone. I'm feeling really tired. What level do I need to be at? Well, for this activity of, playing with my friends, it would probably be more fun if I was in the green zone, or even sometimes it can be in the yellow zone, if I'm playing outside with my friends. How can I get there? I need to probably find some alerting strategies. So then I'll go through the alerting strategies that I've tried out that have worked for me, and I'll give one of those a try. Okay, so we're teaching the child to have this thought process. And really the way that we do this is practice. So use real life examples. If you don't have enough real life examples, act out scenarios, give them, what if, and have them practice applying the right strategy at the right time. Okay. some ways to kind of generate a need for strategies would be trying out some stop and go games. So those can be really fun, especially for children that have a hard time with transitions and for children that tend to get quite excited. So things like red light, green light, which is a game of kind of stop and go. So when we say green light, the child is able to, move around or move towards a specific target. And then when we say red light, they have to freeze. And so then they have to get very good at going from yellow zone to really attentive green zone, or to fast and back down to just right. Musical statues is a similar thing where we're playing some music, and as soon as the music stops, they have to freeze. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? Again, there's some, walking, some moving, some running, but then they also have to wait and listen and ask and follow the instructions. So they ask, what time is it, to the wolf that's on one side, the wolf or the child, I should say, that's on one side of the room. And then all the other children that are lined up on the other side move the number of spaces corresponding to the time that the wolf says. So the wolf says it's 1 o'clock, they move 1 space towards the wolf. 3 o'clock, they move 3 steps towards the wolf until they get close enough to the wolf that the wolf says lunchtime, and the wolf chases them. So there's this excited chase, but then we go back into the listening to the instructions. 1 step, we only take 1 step. And so when we start to see signs that the child is, running at the wrong time or bouncing in their steps, then we can remind them, it looks a little bit like you're in the yellow zone. Is this a game that works really well when we're always in the yellow zone? Not too much, because we need to be listening to instructions. We need to be paying attention to what the wolf says. So maybe we need to do a calm down strategy and walk them through that. Simon Says is similar, where we have to be, yes, we can be silly and playing, but we also have to be listening to instructions. So it's that kind of transition on off that we're practicing with children. Another thing that can be really helpful in applying strategies is having a calm down area, a calm down tool, a calm down even visual aid. So once you've gone through a bunch of different strategies and you know what works for the child, make them a kit, a toolkit, a box, a picture. So in this picture, you have kind of a zone. So maybe a place in the house or in the room or in the apartment that has a few little tools, maybe a soft blanket, maybe a kind of a visual timer, or maybe a little snack that the child can use to help with either alerting or calming down. Maybe there also you have your pictures of the different zones or the different levels. It can also just be a toolkit that you carry around, or a school bag that you carry around that has some specific strategies in it. And it can also be in visuals. So the different programs have different worksheets, but for example, the one that's on the left for zones of regulation, you have essentially just the different zones, and you would start to note in, when I'm in the blue zone, I can take a big breath, or I can jump on a trampoline to wake myself up. When I'm in the red zone, maybe I need to go and take a break and have a little calm down area. When in the green zone, I can just to stay in the green zone, I can take a sip of water, for example. Okay, so there's lots of different examples. In the 5-point scale, there's some that have just a blank column on the side where you can write in the strategy. And you see here an example of where somebody's done that, and it's kind of a fun analogy with the angry bird, so that can also be an interesting adaptation. Here on the left-hand side, you have a visual for a child using the alert program, and so they have for when they're in the high zone, both at school and at home. So that can be an interesting thing to make sure that the child has access to strategies in each environment. So at home, maybe they can use the cushions on the couch to jump on, or the pillow to squeeze, whereas at school they don't have those. So make sure that the visuals reflect what the child has access to. Okay, so that is it. That takes you through all the different steps. You have some references here, and I think what will be more interesting, likely if you want to be putting these into play, are having a look at the specific programs. But as I mentioned, you can find lots of things just online. If you're looking for some resources, some visuals, there's lots that are free online as well. Okay, so that's it for me. And I'm ready if you have some questions. I'll go back to the websites in case you're interested in taking a look at those. And I am available for you.
Thank you, Kerri. So there are lots of questions for you.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so Sneha asks you, if one uses a strategy, for how long should one try the strategy to make sure that it is working? Should it be used once or for a particular period of time?
So there is no golden rule, unfortunately. Definitely, if you have a strategy that seems to be successful, what I would say is think about how it will be applied in different contexts. Try and see if it's successful at home and at school. If it's not, then that's okay. It can be a strategy that stays at school, but make sure that it's clear to the child when it seems to be successful. So definitely, like the visual where we have a home and a school area can be helpful because we want to avoid the child as much as possible, have kind of vetted out where the problems might be, and avoid the situation of a child, doing a fantastic job, recognizing their zone, trying a strategy, and then getting even more frustrated. But definitely, even if we think of our own self-regulation, we don't have just one strategy. We want to have a few, and there can be kind of a burnout on a strategy. I imagine some of you have gone through that kind of experience. So I would, even while I have my solid strategies, I'm, in a session, I'm maybe introducing one or two little things and just kind of noticing a child's reaction to get an idea if that might be a strategy that we implement in the future. So I hope that answers.
Yes, it does. So Gopa asks, is auditory calming strategies, would a program like Soundsori work?
So I think it depends on the child. Unfortunately, I would love to say yes. It's definitely something that you can explore, and definitely there's some music from what I've understood from the program. There's some music that's typically associated with being calming and relaxing music, so classical music or things like that. So absolutely it could, but I won't say that every child that uses one of these auditory listening programs has a calming reaction to them. Some children really, they put it on and they're feeling ready to go. So you'll have to try it out with your child. But if you do see that something like that is helpful, then you can still explore, take that idea and go, okay, what were they listening to that was helpful? Okay, so how can we reproduce that in other situations where we're not yet necessarily following that program? Okay.
Also, he could experiment with some music of classical, which he could get easily before trying some other,
Exactly.
program.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and yeah, try and find, if they respond well, try and find what is it that they enjoyed in that experience and find other ways to use it, because YouTube has tons of classical music. Exactly.
Mahek asks, what age group can each of these modulation programs be applied at?
Mm-hmm. All right. So the programs are made for school-age children with the idea. I'm just trying to think. Yes, all of them are American programs. All of them are for American school-age children. So we're talking about 5 years old, and most of them are for elementary school, which goes to about 12 years old. Not to say that children that are older wouldn't benefit, but maybe you wouldn't use the same pictures or the same analogies. Maybe you would just use labels of the zones. And I would say, although the program was made for those ages, because it's around that age that we have the cognitive maturity to be able to understand and really start self-regulating. but that's not to say that you can't introduce these topics younger or to children that have different needs than typically developing 5 to 12-year-old. So definitely you can be doing more of the or mutual regulation, but still teaching them so that when they get to the level of being ready for self-regulation, it's not brand new to them. They've already heard about these. So I very often will introduce these kinds of programs even to younger children or children that have some intellectual disabilities.
How to make a child do these strategies, especially when they are in the red zone and don't want to listen or follow any instructions?
Wonderful question. Thank you for asking, because it's something that I should definitely mention. So in the red zone, we're saying essentially the red zone is out of control. So our expectation of a child in the red zone is that they aren't available to be doing work, or they aren't available to be responding to very many of our questions. So really, the goal when we're talking about self-regulation, emotional regulation, the goal is prevention. So as much as possible, teaching children to pick up the cues that they're in the yellow zone, and tell them what that looks like, tell them what that sounds like, what that feels like, so that they start to notice. When they're in, and give them strategies so that, I'm in the yellow zone, what can we do to help you calm down? Definitely we want to avoid, if possible, the red zone. When they're in the red zone, and it happens to everybody, I hope everybody can think back to a time in their lives when it's happened. It's normal, it happens. Really what we can do is kind of wait it out, try and give them a place that they can go to calm down, to kind of feel better. If they're available for something like physical comfort, you can always offer strategies, you can have a place to go, but the teaching part would be when they're in a lower zone. The teaching part would be, maybe reflection after, that was a tough time, I saw that you were in the red zone, that was hard, it's hard for me to see, and I'm sure it's hard for you. So what can we do next time? Where can we, how can we notice next time, and maybe give you some strategies, and practice all of those strategies beforehand, so that when a child gets to the point of not knowing what to do, at least in their mind, they have not just the strategy, because for them, some of these, especially in the red zone when we have aggression, some of these aggressions are strategies for them. So maybe at least in their toolbox of strategies, yes, they have, I'm going to slam the door because it makes me feel better, but they also have, it's true, I've taken some breaths and that made me feel better. So, and it can always be offered. I would say, don't force somebody in the red zone to take breaths, don't force them this or that, give them some time to calm down, try to give them some space, and afterwards do the intervention part.
Mehek asks, how do you use visual alerting strategies at home? Any suggestions how we can use visual stimulation? What? So
alerting strategies, is that it?
Yeah, and there's continuation to the question. Can
yes.
I go on?
Okay.
What modulation activities can be done for a 9-year-old schoolboy having attention issues, low arousal, who is chewing on his fingernails and has bitten off the skin out of his fingers?
Okay, I'm going to respond to the first one first. Okay, so we were talking about visual strategies at home for low arousal. So what are our guidelines for visual? So when we have low arousal, what we're looking at doing is alerting them. So our guidelines for visual strategies is having bright, busy, if we can, lights, colors. So at the home, something that can be done is using a flashlight. So that can be really fun for visual, following the flashlight and shining it around. If you have different colored lights, that can also be interesting. Things that are shiny or that reflect lights can be fun. So like sequins and reflective, sometimes we just have like papers that are kind of like craft paper that's a little bit reflective. That can be interesting. So things that kind of shine back, that can be bright. Definitely visualizers that are going a little bit faster, that are a little bit more interesting, can also be not just calming, but kind of alert, organizing. So for some children, that can actually get them engaged. So you can try out if you're interested in exploring more screen type things, screen time options for visualizers, where you can play with a little bit the speed. So that was the first part for alerting strategies. And then the second part was a 9-year-old boy who's having inattention, and did we say movement?
Low arousal.
Low arousal also, okay.
Chewing on his fingers and
chewing on the fingers.
His,
Okay, so always what we want to try and think of is what is the activity that we're getting them to do. Also, I should mention, and even for the previous answers, definitely low arousal can be fine if we're doing an activity that only requires low arousal. If I'm, lying and reading a book and it doesn't, I don't need to do more than that, then that can be fine. But if we're asking the child to do an attention activity, to do some schoolwork, to do some, cognitive type play, well, then low arousal might not work. So then we might want to go into our alerting activities and give them maybe some movement activities. So things where we have, unpredictable kind of quick movements. So jumping or bouncing. Maybe we want to try something with temperature. So we're going with cold, with textures that are maybe a little bit more rough. And then, so that would be for the alerting part. We want to kind of wake them up. So go through some of those alerting activities. And then in terms of the chewing on the fingernails, that it would be interesting to explore if that's something that's only happening when they're in this low arousal state, or if that's something that's happening in other situations. So you can kind of do that sensory journaling and check in, when exactly do they tend to be biting on their nails? Does it happen when they're more bored and they're looking for something to do, and they're just kind of looking for stimulation? Okay. Or does it happen when they see, when they're in a situation that seems to make them nervous? Does it happen when they're trying to pay attention and they're, focusing and biting at the same time? So try and notice that, and then based on when that's happening. So if it's really happening when they're, they're not attentive, they're kind of zoning out and chewing on the nails, then can we give that child a different option? And depending on how the social environment is feeling, that other option might be a snack during those moments where we want them to be focused and they're feeling low arousal. So we might give them something crunchy, something to occupy their mouth, maybe something to drink through a straw, or an object specifically, or gum if the child, enjoys that, or if it's appropriate for the child. So giving them something else to occupy their mouth. And you might also try giving them something else to occupy their hands. In that situation, it's hard to know unless you're exploring a little bit more if it's more of a touch sensation to the fingers, if it's more of an oral seeking sensation, if it's maybe the combination of both. So you might have to explore a little bit. Okay. I think you've turned off your microphone.
Sorry, I had my phone buzzing. Okay. How can we interest a 10-year-old child who gets anxious in the calming techniques without losing interest very quickly, or not using it at all? Should we keep changing the calming strategies, or will it confuse a child?
So it depends on the child. Because of how the question is framed, I have a feeling that for this particular child, they do lose interest. For some children, they even at 10 years old, they're very interested in certain strategies and they work well for those children. For children where it's they're losing interest in the strategies, we can definitely try and have categories for them. So, if we know that calming, breathing is really calming to them, we might just try and explore different ways for them to breathe. So maybe that will help with it being, confusing. We can have the same visual that says, a breathing strategy, but give them, a breathing, a flower and a candle, or give them kind of a visual of, they have some visual breathing visuals in the actually the zones of regulation, and you can find others online where it's written breathe in, breathe out. There's applications, breathing applications with a little visual of a belly, breathing in and then breathing out. So having a bunch of different possibilities. So if we see that they're losing interest on on this, the flower and the candle, well, we can bring in a different breathing strategy, but at least the concept of breathing, they're not getting lost in all the different strategies that exist. Okay. Again, I think your microphone.
I got it. Okay. My child is settled at age 8, but in the crowd, he is like lost and laughs a lot, which takes it back. When he was very young, any help now to settle when we have to face such situations?
Okay. So what it sounds like there is that we have a child that definitely has some strategies and is doing well in a lot of situations, but that it could be, and this would be to explore, it could be some of the visual parts about being in a crowd, some of the auditory parts about being in a crowd, some of the emotional or just the feelings, the social parts of being in a crowd are quite exciting. So what we would want to do is help a child to recognize that, when I'm at home, when I'm doing this activity, I'm, in the green zone, but when I'm out with a group of 10 other people or in a big crowd, whoa, all of a sudden I'm in the yellow zone. So to help them to pick up on that, and how do they know they're in the yellow zone, help them walk them through the different ways of identifying. And then some specific calming strategies that, and I would really prioritize calming strategies that can be done in a bunch of different environments. So we don't want to do calming strategies where they sit on a big beanbag chair, because we can't bring that with us to a crowd. So maybe if we see that it's a little bit more than, if it's a noisy crowd, well, then we can give them, some earbuds and have them listen to some music. And does that help them calm down? Maybe it's more the visual, and we'll give them, a baseball cap or something to reduce a little bit the visual. And does that help them calm down and explore? And also for a child that's that age, if they're at the cognitive level of talking through it, talk through, what does it mean when, you're in a crowd and you're getting really silly? How does it make other people feel? When other people are looking, what might they be thinking? And help them kind of recognize how it impacts other people. Sometimes that helps too.
How to teach a child to self-regulate who has self-laugh, keeps humming or rocking, flapping hands when alone?
When they're alone. Yeah. So again, we want to check in with what is our goal. So if the child is alone and they're kind of on alone playtime, what zone do they need to be in, or what level do they need to be in? And I mean, it depends on the environment, but in a lot of situations, they don't have to be in our green zone, pay attention zone. So if we're really talking about self-regulation, and we're saying when the child is playing alone, they're maybe humming or moving or wiggling, so maybe they're a little bit more excited, maybe in the yellow zone. Does that have a negative implication on the activity? No, not really. I mean, maybe it doesn't work because now in lockdown, their dad is trying to work in the other room and it's too noisy. Well, then we have a motivation to be working on self-regulation. But in that situation, I would question, is it because we want them to do a particular activity when they're playing alone? Or is it really, just that's their way of being alone? if we're, and I understand where parents and therapists are coming from when they ask those kind of questions, because sometimes we're saying, okay, but in social environments, if they're doing it, maybe it might cause people to wonder why they're choosing that strategy. And then maybe we would want to be teaching the children about other strategies to meet those needs that are a bit more socially acceptable. You know, in class, if a child's always humming and wiggling, it could disturb the others. So does the child recognize that, you know, their free play time is different than their class time, and can they find different strategies for those two zones? But if in this situation, if it's really just when the child is free playing, I would question really, can we let the child stay in that zone? Is it causing a problem to their free play, and go from there?
There's a Dr. Sonal who wants to ask you a question. I'm going to unmute her. Right?
Okay, sure.
Sonal, please ask your question. Sonal, you can unmute yourself.
Or if she would
asking the question.
Oh,
so it's okay. So Vikas is asking, is there any case study that you can share with us maybe later? Give us an example of how it works. It would give him more understanding in a practical way.
And how to, so really you're looking for a case study as opposed to like scientific evidence?
Yeah. Something like you worked with a kid and you know how he went through the journey of how he went through with self-regulation and how you progress.
I would say, I mean, it's looking for a written document or just kind of some examples. Like I can definitely give you some examples of children that I've worked with where I've applied this. That's more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe if I give you two different examples, it could kind of illustrate a little bit better. So I did mention that very often with the children that I'm working with, we're working on calm down strategies. Often I'm seeing children that have more hyperactivity and things like that. So much more often that's the situation. One child that I worked with was 10 years old with a diagnosis of ADHD, very smart child, and in a regular school, but had really a very hard time picking up on, noticing even when he was showing all of these hyperactive signs. So he would, you know, underneath his desk be kicking his feet, rocking back his chair. If there was anything on the table, he would be grabbing it. Before I even finished giving my instructions, he's taking the tools and starting to do the activity. So quite impulsive, and really not aware that he was doing these things. So a big part of our therapy, we used zones of regulation, and it was something, luckily, that was also introduced in his school, so he knew it well. But a big part of what we worked on was these body scans to help him notice, because it would really be, if I just asked him what zone you're in, he would say, oh, I'm in the green zone. But while he's saying that, he would be taking the things from my hand, he would be kicking his feet, he would be wiggling his bottom, and he just didn't pick up on it. So first, instead of just asking him, I would take him through this body scan. I would say, okay, so let's notice. What are your feet doing? Okay. What are your hands doing? Okay. How are you, you know, what's your voice doing? And sometimes he's talking at the same time as me and really quickly and trying, but I just need to tell you one thing I didn't tell you about on the weekend, you know? And so I would walk him through that and then ask him the question of what zone he was in, because he was very bright and he knew, when I'm in the yellow zone, I need to do this. When I'm in the green zone, I need to do this. We had gone through that, but his difficulty was really recognizing in himself when those situations happened. And so then with him, we were really working on that and getting him to do it more and more in his head, more and more, without me asking each question each time. We had some visuals for him that he could refer to, and we had different visuals for at home and at school, so that when he, went through the list and he realized, okay, went through his body and he realized I'm in the yellow zone. Okay, I can try this, this, this. And at school, he had certain strategies as well. And the teacher was helping him, giving him just a little cue. Sometimes it was a little tap on his desk, and that was kind of his reminder that, oh, he had to do his body scan and think about what level he was at. So that was for an older child that really understood quite well the zones, and it was just knowing when to apply them. He was really smart and understood it all and could tell me everything. The green zone looks like this, but in himself, his own experience, it was very hard for him to make the connection. And just to give another example, I worked with a boy that was 4 years old, and we were doing kind of an adapted version of the alert program, where we had the 3 levels. He was very interested in dinosaurs, so we were doing the dinosaur levels. And he would have, he would really fluctuate a lot in the sessions when I worked with him. And at home too, he was having a lot of difficulty with emotion management. He would go, to extreme tantrums and then just kind of flop on the floor and be exhausted. So I think just his emotions were so draining on him that he really had ups and downs. And so we were really working on both levels. Sometimes I would sit him down we were also doing a bit of fine motor, sit him down to do an activity, and he would be slouched on the side. And so then it was more co-regulation, where I was telling him, oh geez, I see that your body is slouched, your muscles look tired, you're in and we were using dinosaurs, so he was in the brachiosaurus, really slow. And then before we sit down and do this coloring, let's see if we can find something to wake you up a little bit. And I would tell him the zone that I see. I would show him on my scale. I would help him put the little arrow at the brachiosaurus, and then we would go and do kind of an alerting activity. And for him, he liked things like swings, and we would do lots of unpredictable swinging. Vibration for him was really exciting, so he would use that. And so for him, it was a lot of up and down. And really, it was just, once I had taught him the levels, it was just talking to him throughout the session about what I saw and about what strategies I recommended. And then at home, we were pairing that too. And so the expectation wasn't that he regulates himself. He's still quite young to do that, but that he understood what strategies we were picking and why we were picking them. And he started to make some links with, oh, when I'm feeling fast like a T-Rex, that's a good time for me to go and ask my mom for a big tight squeeze because I need to relax. Okay, I hope that gives you a bit of an idea.
And I think when you follow it at all levels, aspects of his day, the child is able to then bring a lot of self-awareness of where he is on his own. So
and it's a nice strategy. Of course, it's a nice strategy to do in therapy, but if it's just in therapy, I don't think it will be very effective. It really needs to be something that where the parents are on board, where at school they're on board, and people know, and it's really about using this common language and helping the child realize that all of these levels happen, to everybody, and that there's strategies that we can do if we need to help get regulated for some activities.
Sure. The last couple questions.
Yes.
Strategies to teach a child to differentiate between the two environments, like the house and the school. How do you teach him to understand that this is the house, and this is how you need to be, this is how you need to regulate yourself in the house?
Okay, so the issue is not just is in understanding if there's different norms for how we can act in the house and in the school.
Correct.
So I guess the best thing would be to be as concrete as possible, and to make sure that those norms, like, I guess it would depend on what the norms are. But for example, if I'm just thinking of what could be an issue. For some children, especially at school, school is an environment where we have a lot of this green zone activities. So there's often a lot of activities or a lot of expectation that we're quite calm and attentive and ready. So for at school, when we're sitting, and doing all those activities, we can teach them that, when the teacher's talking, this is a time where it's important to be in the green zone. And you can always do act out scenarios. Even if you're not in school, you can always practice at home and act them out. But have the child not just recognize their own zone, but have the child be able to say, if I was at school and it was story time, what zone would be a good zone to be in? Okay. And if I was at school and it was lunchtime, would it be okay to be in the blue zone or in the red zone? And so help them to kind of take out different scenarios in their day at home and at school, and help them to identify what would be a good zone to be in. Because of course there's this inner state that we need to pick up on, but we need to make sure that our inner state is matching the environment, like you're saying. So I would kind of flip it like that and ask them, in this situation, what's a good zone? In that situation, what's a good zone?
Last question. Dr.
Yes.
Priyanka is asking, any strategies for a non-verbal or low cognitive level children with ASD?
So I definitely have used this with children that are nonverbal and that have intellectual disabilities and that have autism. But what I would say is really my expectation is not self-regulation. My expectation is regulation, but really with the help of an adult. So co-regulation or mutual regulation. I would still use a visual, and depending on the level of the child, it might be a very simple visual. It might be a visual of characters that they know and understand, or it might just be kind of different colors or numbers depending on what they understand. I would still use the visual, and I would talk the child through at their level and at their understanding, talk the child through different levels. So, if I see that the child is really low arousal, I might show them on the visual, oh, we're here at the low, or in the blue. I would show them there. And then sometimes what we have is visuals that have different strategies, or I would just show them, let them choose of the strategies that I've chosen that I think will help to alert them, give them 2 options, let them choose their option, and then go back and do the check-in. Oh, we're not in the blue anymore. Now we're in the green zone, or now we're in the just right zone. So I would still use the visuals. I would still use the terminology, but the expectation isn't that the child is able to label themselves what level they're at. We're telling them. And the expectation is not that the child can choose the right strategy by themselves. We're either choosing for them or giving them options, but based on what we think will definitely alert them or calm them, whatever we're looking for.
So that was the last question, Kerri. Thank you for the lovely presentation. You were spot on. You've given us so much of information to take back home. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Would you please stop your screen share? I will get everybody to get their cameras on, and you can have a look to all the people that you've been giving the presentation to. Everybody, can you switch on your cameras?
Then I get to take a little look at the comments as well.
Yes. And you guys can.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to have you.
And please comment on how did you find Kerri's presentation today. We would love to see your feedback. Someone can even unmute themselves and give a let us know.
Hi, Jasmeet.
Hi. Please go ahead.
Hi, Kerri. This is the third webinar that I'm attending, and it's really helping me with my 9-year-old who's on the spectrum. And today's calming therapy is because he has too much of sensitivity. So today's calming therapies are really going to work. So thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
I'm so happy to hear it.
Thank
Hi.
you. God bless you.
Hi, Jasmeet. Hi, Kerri.
Hi, Apurva.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so thankful. And the examples and the techniques are simple to follow, especially in a home which is turned into a school, into a playground, into everything, all in one. So the transitions are very easy to be able to take ourselves and our children through the entire rigmarole. So thank you, Kerri. This was so educational. Thank you so much.
So happy to hear it. That's so wonderful. Great. Good luck applying everything. Keep up the motivation.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Hi, Kerri. Jasmeet, can I?
Yeah, Dolly, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Kerri. This is Dolly, and I myself am a pediatric occupational therapist practicing in Mumbai. I have my center in Borivali, and I am so honored to learn from you. OT, learning from another OT, and trust me, the techniques that you have been putting up, I have started sharing those kind of techniques and applying those with my parents and my kids, and they are really so happy, and we are seeing the change, and my parents have started co-regulating themselves through all the sensory strategies that you have taught during the webinar, and also your webinar today was really much more in-depth analysis of how actually you can improvise onto your self-arousal, self-modulation. There are so many terminologies, definitely, but it's just really great to have you, and we are still waiting for another one more webinar, and I'm so happy that this time in the 6 series they've given you 3 opportunities. So we get more opportunities to learn from you, because it's honor to learn from you. You are truly amazing. Thanks a lot.
My goodness, that's very sweet, and I hope that that it's very clear that this information that I've gotten, I haven't developed on my own. I've been taking, you know, other OTs have been helping. These programs that I'm showing you are by OTs and teachers and all of that. So it's really this community network that's helping us all, and at the end of the day it's to help the children. So I'm super happy that you guys are here. I'm super happy that it's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. One thing which I like, definitely there's somebody who has developed all these intervention techniques and strategies, but one thing which I like about your webinar is the way you organize everything and put it forward. It's really it is very nice, because we have been doing webinars, many of the workshops, and you know, we are doing lots of other courses also with just conduct, and I am almost always doing the courses that she conducts. But the way you are putting forward in a webinar is really great, because this is very this is not only a practical approach. This is more like when we study from you, it's more like, you know, we have to just sit on the screen and study, but you've been putting it forward in a way that we can actually correlate with the child. So that is what makes it more practical, and you know, makes more useful for the parents and for the therapist also.
I'm very happy. That's 100% my goal, is for it to be as concrete as possible. And yes, there's some theory that we need to go over, but really I want it to be, you know, what will you do when you see that child the next time, and have tools right away. I'm very glad.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you for the feedback.
Kerri, this is Mehak here. I had asked a few questions in the chat box and you had replied them wonderfully. I'm so obliged to learn from you. You have given me such concrete knowledge. It's not just theory, it is applicable strategies, bang on, specific to each of my questions which I asked. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's very nice to hear. It's okay if you guys don't like some of the things too, or if you try something and it doesn't work. You can tell me, I can take it, because I go through that as well. And sometimes, you know, it's like I've been saying, trial and error. So it doesn't have to be all wonderful comments. You're allowed to say, I tried that, Kerri, and it wasn't the best. That's all right.
I think I think the best part, sorry, Mehak, I think the best part was, Kerri, that you put everything together now in one presentation, giving us options to look at, which was a good summary. And,
Yes.
and it's years of work. It's not something that you just picked out and, it just happened, So, and
Exactly.
it was backed with the knowledge of experience that you have. So that's what makes it so special.
Wonderful.
And always Kerri has told us to, follow through the sensory journaling, explore the various things, whether they are working, not working. It's not necessary that one calming activity can be calming for another child. Out of our
Yeah.
own experience, we've seen that. So it's nothing that this strategy is good or bad or workable or not workable. It is workable in this context, in this child or not, that we have to explore.
Absolutely. And I think that's always my fear when I'm talking about sensory, is that people think that there's only one way to do things and that it has to be following this specific, protocol, and that's the only way that we can help a child. And in my experience, that is far from the truth. There's so much variety and there's so many options, and really we need to be okay with that unfortunately there's not a one size fits all. Our children are very different. They all have their personalities, and we need to be, we need to accept that trial and error. It's okay that we make mistakes. It's okay that we try something and it's not perfect. We'll try something different. We have other strategies, and we understand, the general guidelines.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful session, Kerri. We've really gone past our time.
That's fine. No problem. All of you guys can go to sleep. For me, it's still the afternoon, so I've still got energy. And we'll see you then next week. Wonderful.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Kerri, so much.
Thank you, Kerri.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.